So good morning everyone, and welcome to the 20th live stream here from Mount Stewart. Obviously we're in another sort of various regional lockdowns. There's another one just arrived here as well. There we go. In various regional lockdowns at the moment, of course, so I'm probably expecting it to be a little busier on the live streams today, so welcome everyone, and if you're new, do let us know where you're watching from. I thought I'd put a spin today on the live stream being a bit of a sort of a homeschooling edition, given that pretty much all the schools are closed across certainly Northern Ireland and obviously across England and Wales in certain locations. So if we've got the whole family watching with the kids as well, I absolutely love kids' questions. So do ask them, and we'll get through plenty of questions as well. It doesn't have to be about red squirrels, it could be about anything you want. There she is. So, great to have them. So it is absolutely tipping it down here at the moment, and that doesn't stop the tummies rumbling, of course, and it's actually sort of really demonstrates the quite sort of typical behaviour that you get in winter, where you get the bad weather. They're quite purposeful about what they're going to be doing. They don't want to get too wet and cold, so they're pretty much very busy going straight to known food sources. That's either caches that they already have, or like here where we do a certain amount of supplementary feeding, they'll come here to check out what's been put out. And of course I've refreshed everything this morning, and you've got them back and forward, so there she is. She goes off again there just to cache some of the nuts away in the woods. And just bake out her sort of patting them down over there in the undergrowth. There you go, pat, 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 pat. So what's really fantastic about this is a big chunk of the supplementary feeding that we do here are actual cob nuts, so hazelnuts. And they're all, just got out a picture there, they're all viable seeds. So these red squirrels are actually replanting the understory of the woodland here for us, and since we've been stocking the cob nuts, here you'll love this, right down in front of us here, since they've been replanting all these trees, we're getting so many hazelnut trees coming up through the woodland, which is brilliant because it's a native woodland species that's really missing here in the woodlands at Mount Stewart. So I'm really pleased that, well, it's classic sort of native species benefiting the broader ecosystem, and it just really illustrates their place here within woodland ecology. So flitting back and forward here a little bit, because we've got two reds sort of going back and forth at the moment. So like I say, because it's raining for those that are joining just now, they're going to be back and forward a little bit, so we'll pick them up. But of course, for anyone who's just joining, let's do the old proper introductions here, and we'll see how we go. Right, so hello, I'm Area Ranger Toby. I'm here at Mount Stewart, of course. For those of you who are new to the live streams, do let us know if it's the first time watching. Of course, all the regulars, hello to everybody. I can just see from your comments there, you're just coming up. So hi Barbara, hi Emma, hi Fiona. Fiona's there with Jack again. Hey Jackie. Hey Liz, how's it going? Hiya Susan. I'll answer your question in a moment. Hiya Leslie. Hiya Nick. Hi Elizabeth. Fiona, you've got another question now. I'll answer that one in a minute as well. Just do the introductions. Hiya Alan from Bangor. Hiya, is it Malarkey Clarkey? Are you Malachi maybe? That's a cool name. Gillian, good morning. Hiya Astrid. What have we got here? And hiya Valerie, hiya Laura, for everyone who's just checking in with us. So very warm welcome here. Well, not so warm here at the moment. I'm actually quite cold, but that's why I've got the old snood on. So we'll spin back round here, and we'll pick up some of the questions that are coming in already. So, where was it? First question just at the start there. Let's pick it up. Okay, Susan asks, are the squirrels out more now that it's quieter on the estate? She's never been able to see them when we have been there. Well, it certainly helps. Like all wild creatures, they're going to be a certainly cautious about things. I guess certainly when we started everything here, there's one right there. When we started everything here with the sort of the broader red squirrel conservation program, it's a recovering population. There are very few here, and I guess the population has grown up in the last few years with maybe more increased visitor activity. So they're not complacent to visitor activity, but they're certainly a little bit more used to it. So just for example, earlier on, when I was out here just refreshing the station, here comes the next one, and they're actually just sort of sat up in the trees there. They kind of got used to me being around, and they will quite happily move around the estate with visitors passing underneath the trees and everything. But I mean, these are wild creatures, so it's certainly not going to be sort of hanging around loads. But there's been some fantastic encounters that visitors have told me, where they've just sort of, as long as you're still, no sudden movements, and sort of keep your overall noise down, they're quite happy sort of getting on, with their day and their business. So yeah, like everything, you probably have seen them, Susan, but you just haven't noticed them. One thing I quite often see is when they do freeze up in the canopy, they really do look just like a sort of a dead branch or a dead leaf hanging from the tree. So so keep your eyes out and listen as well. Listen for the movement in the canopy when on your visits. They're definitely out there. So we're sitting about 45, maybe 50 or so average population here on the estate. But obviously the red squirrel hide would be one of the best places to see them because it's a congregation point. But yeah, of course, we have to be closed at the moment with the hides. It's an indoor space, unfortunately. So it made sense to do the hides live stream today, and of course it's chucking it down. And if anybody watched the live stream from Grey Abbey Bay, you'll know that water and trying to do live streams just doesn't work very well. So that was quite an amusing live stream. So yeah, I hope that sort of answers, Susan. Keep your eyes out. Some really hot spots to when you're out walking. At the moment, it kind of varies depending what food is about in the various parts of the woodland. But the North Domain Trail, the North Ride that goes around the north of the estate, pretty much all through the woodlands there are really good to see them. Clark's Hill and McComb's Hill, just either side of the Central Lake Gardens, are pretty good, and up around the Ploughman's Walk, and just past the Glen Burn, so Temple of the Winds, down the hill, past the Glen Burn and up onto Patterson's Hill, which is part of the Blue Trail. That's a pretty good area to quite often see them around there. Keep an eye out for our little monitoring stations around the place as well. So there we go. There we go. So Nick asks, Karis and Ellie and Gabriel would like to know, I can't quite see the picture, would like to know what they eat. Okay, so well, here obviously we're doing some supplementary feeding, but their natural food sources would range anything from the obvious tree seeds and nuts and things like that. It just buzzed away. Spin around. So tree seeds, nuts, pine cones and things like that. I've got some really good examples here actually. Just go up. So when you're out and about, guys, if you're visiting an area with red squirrels, look out for these ones on the ground. So these are just young Scots pine cones, and that's what they look like when they've been eaten. So kind of like a nibbled corn on the cob. And when it comes to the spruce cones, they really look like a nibbled corn on the cob, like that. So keep an eye out for these, and obviously all the chippings on the floor. So the tree seeds are one of the obvious ones. They also eat fungus, so mushrooms. They'll eat a bit of lichen as well. They actually get most of their moisture from lichen. So you don't often see them sort of drinking from sort of pools as such, unless it's particularly dry. But when you get the dew in the morning, they'll go around and sip the moss and sip the lichen. I'm just going because they're going back and forward at the moment, so I'm just trying to spot them where they're going. Spin around. Other food sources would be small insects. They will eat small insects. They will have the odd egg every now and then in spring. There she goes. What else? Oh, Jesus, there's all sorts of things. Berries. They will eat berries. They're partial to apples, so if anybody's got apple trees in the garden and have red squirrels in the area, you'll know that they'll quite often sort of carry off an apple every now and then, which is quite comical when the apples are pretty much the size of them. So yeah, a huge range of food sources. And I guess one of the key things to sort of note here is that they play a really important part, and I was mentioning this earlier on, in sort of distribution of seeds within a woodland environment. So they're quite forgetful, and of course, they'll catch more than they actually need, and they'll be burying it out in the woods and things like that. And of course, those tree seeds often grow. So between, it's noted in various research that between sort of red squirrels and jays, they're one of the most significant sort of distributors of tree seeds, particularly acorns. Jays in particular, actually, with acorns, funny enough, because they're one of the few things that carry them obviously uphill. So it's how you get sort of progression of woodland within sort of hill environments. And speaking of jays, there's one actually just out there, so it might come down in a minute. See, beautiful little birds. I'll spin back over because this other squirrel keeps going back and forward over there at the moment. So I hope that's a little insight there for you guys. I enjoyed that question. So Fiona asks, have you seen any pine martens recently? Yeah, I mean, they're here at the hide area pretty much most nights. One of our volunteers, David, was out. He sort of sees certainly the evidence of them a lot. They're scats around the place, so scat is their poo. And one of our other volunteers, Tony, actually saw one down in Pasterson's Wood on the Blue Trail. I think it was Saturday morning, I believe. So yeah, I mean, they're certainly out and about, roaming around at the moment. Every time I turn round, she just nips out of picture just there. I'll keep it here again. So yeah, they're certainly here. We definitely have a breeding pair. If you haven't seen them, if you go back through some of the videos on the Mount Stewart Facebook page, there's sort of various clips that put together of some of the night animals that frequent here, and of course we've got there she is. We've got the badgers that are here quite regularly as well. Long-eared owl quite often perches here. I don't think I put the footage out of that one actually yet. Or maybe I did. Yes, it was on one of the videos. I think it was in the autumn wildlife camera roundup video of the long-eared owl, and it was perched just up here while the badgers were hoking around down here, and then the pine marten was over there. So it was a really good little clip. So yeah, things are really progressing here within sort of the woodlands. I think it's a real illustration of some of the quick turnarounds for some species since we've been working our way through removing invasive plant and animal species, or restoring some of the natural balances. But I mean, it's very much a long game. The other one's she's just behind the tree over there. So, oh no, there she is up there. There we are. Right, they're onto the boxes now, so they might stay still for a little bit. Yeah, so plenty of pine marten activity, which is really good. Pick up what else we got here. So, some questions. So Malarkey Clarkey asks, her daughter would like to know, would the reds at Mount Stewart eat any eggs or young birds, or would they have enough food on site? So yeah, I mean, it's a really important point. It's very, very rare that red squirrels would eat chicks. They have been known to have eggs on occasion. I think this is something that's worth talking about in sort of relative terms here. So your population density of red squirrels within your average acreage is maybe about, at the most, sort of like 3/4 to 1 red squirrel per acre. Now that's really, really low population density, and so in terms of that sort of natural element of predation, because they are omnivores, it's negligible to say the least. It's important also to talk about in comparison to the non-native grey squirrel, of course, which really does actively predate on birds in their chicks, on their eggs, as well as everything else, and sort of eats double if not triple the amount of sort of foods per squirrel, and they live at a far higher density, and so they can have a real net negative impact on woodland ecology. So yeah, I mean, it's like everything. For the red squirrel, it's a native species. It's evolved within its own woodland ecology here, and it has certainly its place. The same could be said for obviously pine marten. You know, they are omnivores as well. Now they spend most of their time actually. There she is. Most of their time eating worms, slugs, snails, things. But again, pine martens will predate on birds, and they'll predate on red squirrels as well. But it's a whole natural selection element where you have basically sort of survival of the fittest. So the weak and the infirm within any given population will succumb to predation from apex predators, for example, or the next predator up. And so you actually, over the long term, have a more resilient, a stronger population. So yeah, probably went off on a slightly side from there, but it's natural balance for that. So Valerie's watching from the Claygate Lodge, one of our tents. Hi Valerie. She's got 2 reds visiting the garden. That's lovely, Valerie. Just be careful that they don't get encouraged too much to cross the road at the sort of the main entrance area there. We had a problem a few years ago where they kept getting run over there. But sure, I'll catch up with you on some of that. But they certainly use that as a corridor passing between the mid area of the estate and then onto New Hill up towards the temple. Yeah, brilliant. Laura's watching from the Lake District. Hi, Laura. So which part of the Lake District are you watching from? Because obviously there is a very small, hanging on by a thread population in the north areas of the Lake District. As far as I know, the groups that are helping to sort of contain the grey squirrel spread and protect the red populations in the lakes are doing fairly well. It's a bit of an uphill struggle because they don't have perhaps as many geographical protections like we do here on the peninsula, and we're surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, so it's a very sort of a slightly easier buffer zone that we can manage to the north of us here. So Michael's watching his first time, and you're homeschooling as well. Well, Michael, let us know what your questions are, and I'm happy to answer any questions. It doesn't have to be about red squirrels, it could be about wildlife, it could be about anything. Apologies, I mean, you can ask some geological questions if you want. I did study geology. So I pick up a few more questions here. It's great to have so many questions coming in. Simon says, hi there. Bodhi and I are at home warm and dry. I take it, is it Bodhi's your son? Is that right? Brilliant. Jackie says, Max is 6 tomorrow, and she made him a card with a red squirrel and asked him to find facts, and I'll send this to his mum's phone. Brilliant. It would be great. I'd love to see the card if you happen to take a photo of it. That'd be lovely to share, Jackie. Do send it in to us. Michael asks, I'll take this son asking, why do squirrels eat nuts? Well, nuts are really high in protein, energy and fat. I mean, they're seeds basically, so like any seed, it needs the energy to be able to grow into whatever plant it is. So my seeds are absolutely brilliant and full of energy. Actually, a really good example here, just while they're sort of off around the corner, I'll just show you some of our supplementary feeding. I mean, we basically use a whole combination of different things. So we will use a certain amount of peanuts, not too many though. It's quite high in fat, which is great, but they're also very soft. So feeding just peanuts all the time can lead to weak jaws and actually, interestingly enough, a calcium deficiency. So we don't go too mad on the peanuts. They get sunflower shells in their shells, of course, so they have to use their teeth to break them open, and of course they're also in their shells still, which means they can store and cache them. We've got the cob nuts and hazelnuts, of course. So these are all viable seeds. They're quite big ones, really cacheable. They last a long time. But just as an illustration about energy that seeds have and why they eat tree seeds in particular. Now I know this is sweet corn here, maize. Just a bit bright. There we go. So you can see here, see that little white section in the middle? So that's called the wheat germ. So all the bit around the edge is actually sort of starch. And the wheat germ is the bit that actually sort of spearheads the growth of the seed. Now, what the red squirrels do, they eat that tiny little wheat germ out. Can you see it's been sort of nibbled out? Here's one of the originals. So we do that. There we go. Just about sort of make that on the camera. So yeah, they just focus on that, and they actually discard the rest of this, and other birds and things pick them up. But of course, when it comes to the likes of tree seeds and things like that, so here's a spruce cone for example, the seeds are at the base of this. They'll discard the husk and everything and just eat the little pine nut at the bottom. And again, energy, fats and so on, and other food sources for different things. You know, they know what they need, so they'll seek out what they need depending on what sort of minerals and nutrients they need. So they seem to know better than we do, because we eat a lot of crap, don't we, as humans? But there you go. So, hiya Jennifer. Oh, John's on. Hi John. How hard is it for squirrels to find food in winter? Asks John's daughter Lily, who's 8. It depends on the condition of the habitat, Lily. You know, in a good condition woodland where you have all sorts of different food sources, it could be pretty good. But equally enough, if we've got a very harsh winter, just get the focus there. There we go. If we have a very harsh winter, say like we had last week, we had quite a long frozen period, but if that went on for a long period of time, it could be quite hard for all animals to find food, because it either gets frozen underground, they can't get to it, or they've actually used it all up because they're having to stay warm. So mammals are warm-blooded, and you have to keep eating food to be able to generate the heat to stay warm as mammals. So how hard is it? Yeah, like I say, it is. I think it's based on the condition of the woodland, really. For us here in Northern Ireland, we do not have very much woodlands. There's about 6 or 7% woodland coverage in Northern Ireland, which is just woeful, really. It's about 12 or 13% in England and Wales, a little higher in Scotland. That's just shocking, really. Here they come. And another one in the background. This is great. So this is Stripe here, in front of us. You can tell by her tail. Can you see she's got a stripe just near her hind legs? There she goes. And the other one's out the back. So Stripe's she's the boss around here. She's definitely the most dominant of the squirrels. And probably a good chance to mention that. So regular viewers will have seen the likes of Tristan and Leslie. They have been taking amazing photographs here, along with Angus as well over the years. And I want to say a really big thank you to Tristan and Leslie, who have donated a whole sequence of food for the red squirrels and supported our supplementary feeding as part of the wider programme here. So a huge thank you for you. Tristan cleared out Marks and Spencer's of all their Christmas nuts, which was hilarious. So I've got a big stock of those that's going to last through the year. That's fantastic. And Leslie's just recently ordered in some more of our supplementary feeds to get going. So real thanks. So do check out their Facebook and Instagram. So Tristan is tristan.bain on Instagram. Beautiful photos there. He loves to say he's got a fox that visits the end of his garden, and some amazing photos of the fox there. And Leslie is Leslie Barker Photography on Facebook, and I think her Twitter and Instagram handle is @m13ldb. Do check them out. I know Leslie's watching. Pop your links in, Leslie, so people want to see your page of the photographs, and it's I think it's really worth highlighting actually how photography like that has really helped our population monitoring here. So because it's very hard to sort of get a census on population, because they're quite widely distributed, they're quite elusive, so we use trail cameras and things like that. But to get really good quality images of individuals, you can actually really look at all the different coat features and try and just swing around, and you can start to identify them, their little unique features, and you get a real good idea then of how many are out, so we get a good population census, and that really helps inform how our work is going on, and you know, whether the population's in a good condition, really. So yes, so really good thanks for those. Also a quick shout out as well actually to Ulster Wildlife Trust and their Red Squirrels United programme. They sponsored all of the Red Squirrel groups some peanuts this Christmas as well, so that was really nice of them to all of the Northern Ireland Red Squirrel groups got 15 kilograms of peanuts, which all helps, definitely. So yeah, definitely thanks to them. Just on the note, I'm seeing there's loads of questions coming in, really great, thanks for asking that, we'll get through them. Just out of interest, for anyone who is homeschooling, or if there's any teachers watching, there's a really good resource. I'll just get it to focus here. Ooh, is it going to focus? So I'll spin it around. In my this Red Squirrels, it's going to be back to front for you guys. Red Squirrels, it's a teacher resource pack. You can get this on the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, the DAERA website. But if you just search Red Squirrels Northern Ireland teachers, that should come up. It's a fantastic resource put together by NIA and the Red Squirrel Forums for education. It's fantastic. I'm actually using some of that stuff today just to sort of help it to be relatable. Okay, who's that one up there? I think that's one of the others. It's got a thinner tail. There we are. So I'll pick up some more questions. Hiya Charmaine, good morning. Donna, hiya. In all the years I've been going to Mount Stewart, I've never seen a red squirrel. It's great to see them today. Thanks for sharing. You're very welcome. Donna, you're not alone. I do hear it a lot. I've been coming here for decades and I still never seen a red squirrel. I was saying to one of the others earlier on, they are there. You do need to use your senses, like really listen just as much as looking, and you get to know sort of some of the places that they go. And like I say, the red squirrel hide helps. It's not guaranteed, but yeah, if you keep your movement slow and steady, sometimes it's worth just actually head out somewhere on the trails, or up into the fringes of the lake walks, so up on the two hills there, and okay, just seeing the burying the nuts. Yeah, head up onto those hill areas and just sit down and relax for a bit. You'll be amazed how much starts coming out of the woodwork just after a few minutes. Just sit down and relax and sort of just take everything in for a bit. God, they're really busy today. There's not too much hanging around in this rain. Okay. Good morning, Angela. Good morning to Concepta. Okay, I'm just spinning through the questions. Chris asks, hi Toby, do you know their individual names? Well, do you know what? Funny enough, we very rarely name them, but Stripe, who you saw earlier on, I mean, you couldn't call her anything but Stripe, and because she's such a dominant character here, particularly at the hides, it's one of the few we've ever named over the years. But I suppose one of the reasons I don't name them too much is probably, they're wild animals. I don't want to sort of humanise them too much, if that makes sense. And also, they only really live in the wild, maybe about sort of 3 to 6 years on average. 6 years would be really good for a red squirrel. So you do see a certain amount of a turnaround quite quickly. They're really busy today. Right down at the feet. Those wet ear tufts are hilarious. Just stole a nut out of the... what I do is I put cob nuts just in the little rafter holes here so they climb up the sides. You've got to make them work so it can't be just like free food all the time. So yeah, on that note actually, so we supplementary feed here. It's not a permanent feed source. The feed source is there at certain times and topped up maybe about every 2, maybe 3 weeks. We change the amount of food and what the mix is throughout the year depending on what natural food sources are available. So this time of year, sort of January, February, March, and actually as far as into May can be a bit of a food gap. So food sources that were sort of cached over autumn. Fungi has started to run out, and spring food sources haven't started to come in yet. So this is the time of year that we would sort of up our supplementary feeding just a little bit, because our key aim here is about rebuilding the population, but we don't want them to rely on this as a food source. This is the only area here on the peninsula that we do a permanent feeding at the hide, because it's a central area linked to a number of different woodlands. But when it comes to our monitoring stations, they're monitoring and that is it. So when they run dry, so if they clear them out after just a few days, that's it. They need to go looking for their natural food. And when we do feed here, you can see there's little holes dotted around the wood. You can sort of just make them out here and there. So these are all little holes I've drilled into the wood sources here. So we'll stash nuts and other bits of feed in there, and they have to go looking for it. So it's kind of like enrichment that would take place within sort of a zoo environment. So in fact, there you go. She's just found one there. I wonder if she's going to pick up that walnut. So it's one of the Christmas nuts. Now she's grabbed a cob nut, a hazelnut there. When they pick up the walnuts, it's hilarious. Walnuts are bigger than their heads, so they're trying to carry them off is quite comical. So we don't want them to rely on this as a food source, because if whatever happens that suddenly we're not able to feed them, or for example, we have grey squirrel incursions quite often, and we need to take down all our feeders for biosecurity there, just in case those greys that turn up are carrying squirrel pox. The last thing we want is to encourage them to be interacting in the same location. So we would move to sort of intermittent scatter feeding. But our long-term aim here is about getting their natural environment into a better condition. So our long-term woodland management plan is about enhancing the condition of the plants and tree species within the woodlands here at Mount Stewart, but also connecting them together with what other woodlands still exist on the peninsula. So like I said earlier on, woodland cover within Northern Ireland is woeful, to say the least. And so what little woodland there is fragmented and disjointed, and it might as well be the Sahara Desert between those woodlands. So by working with landowners and so on to encourage them to help connect these woodlands together, so looking at targeted routes that we can enhance the thickness of a hedgerow, for example, just as simple as that, or pockets of woodland around the place that can be almost stepping stones for the likes of red squirrels, and of course insects and other small mammals and birds as well. It benefits them all. That's our long-term aim. So yeah, there we go. Went on another tangent of a talk there. There we go. So, pick up a few more questions. Alan asked, do we have many greys at the moment? So right now, I've just actually started totalling up last year's figures for the Ards Peninsula, and we had 109 grey squirrel incursions across the whole peninsula last year. That's a very high year. 2018 was 36. So relatively speaking to certainly places obviously on the mainland that have red squirrel, grey squirrel buffer zones, I mean that pales. I mean, people are into the thousands trying to hold off grey squirrel spread. So here at Mount Stewart, in particular, we actually only had 4 grey squirrel incursions. Most of our grey squirrel incursions are actually up on our buffer zone, which is up to the north of us here. We try and head them off at the pass, as it were. It's ongoing. It'll always be a problem, and the North Down Red Squirrel and Pine Marten group, who are our neighbouring group up in the North Down, they operate across sort of Killynether, Cairnwoods, Clandeboy. There's a small population of reds hanging on there. They actually get the bulk of the grey squirrel incursions, because they're heading straight out onto sort of dominant grey areas that have been taken over now for decades almost. So they sort of thin the numbers down, and we can usually head off the last few at the pass, which is really good. So thankfully we are clear all but one at the moment, Alan. We have just one that we've been trying to get for a little while. We've got it isolated in one of the southern woodlands on the estate. It's proven a difficult one to get. It's certainly trap shy. But yeah, so we've got one at the moment. but the rest of the peninsula is pretty much clear as I know. But then January and February is the time when they start moving around again, so I'm expecting sightings of grey squirrels and incursions to increase. Okay, I'll pick up the rest of new questions. Why do squirrels climb trees? From Abigail. So squirrels are arboreal creatures. So arboreal means trees, it's arbor. So like many different species, they have their particular habitats. So red squirrels in particular are... Let's get in stroppy with each other again. Red squirrels in particular spend in excess 80, even maybe even sort of 90-ish% of their time in the actual tree canopy. And just interesting comparison to grey squirrels, although they're technically arboreal creatures as well, they spend far more time on the ground, which is interesting. They are very active today. Sorry if the camera's going around, trying to keep focused on them. So and of course, because they're arboreal, that's where a lot of their food sources are. So they'll harvest a lot of the tree seeds, for example, or like I was saying earlier on, they'll get their food sources from lichen and moss, which grows in the trees. They'll eat a little bit of it, but most of their water comes from lichen. So they live where their food is, basically, Abigail. Really good question. Heather's watching. Hi, Heather. Emma asks, what part of the day/night are they most active? Morning and sort of late afternoon would be their most active time, Emma. So that comes off the back of, first thing in the morning, tummy's rumbling, they want to get out and get some food. And then what you'll find, depending on the time of year, they'll, certainly in summer, they'll actually have a bit of a siesta. You'll find them even just snoozing, sort of draped over a branch like this, having a bit of a sleep. But in the winter, they're active right through. But on a day like today, it's raining. It's not bad weather, but certainly on sort of pretty rough weather, they'll probably just stay curled up in their dray, maybe just nipping out very quickly to get some food from their cache or nearby cache or something like that, and then sort of sleep. So it does range, but yeah, and of course, come the afternoon, evening, they'll have a quick sort of foray to get some more food to stock them up for the night, and then they'll sort of sleep for the night. Actually, speaking of drays, just a really good example. I'm going to have to move very slowly. Hopefully, this doesn't cut off. But there is a dray. Let's see if I can see it here. There it is. See that big bundle of sticks up there? I'm going to move back before the signal goes up. That was a dray. They built one right above the hide. So yeah, a little bundle of sticks. They quite often use, they make drays within ivy. So see this big ivy stand just up here actually? That's the sort of thing that they might sort of hollow out a little area and bring material in and sort of set up a little dray in there. So yeah, bundle of sticks. Quite often they can be mistaken for like rook and crow nests. But usually if you sort of get a bit sideways perspective, you can see they're more of a ball than they are a sort of flat plateau, like a rook or a crow or a jackdaw nest would be. Yeah. Okay. Oh, brilliant. John has just linked, he just dropped the link in there for the teacher's resource publication. So if you look in the comments there, he's just linked. Thank you very much, John. Side note, John is one of the NIEA wildlife officers. He works in the North Down group as well. So he's also secretary for the Northern Ireland Red Squirrel Forum. So John's a big man in the red squirrel world here in Northern Ireland. So good to have you on board, John. Nice to have your daughter obviously asking questions as well. It's nice to have this chap here actually nice and still, because the other three red squirrels that are here at the moment are just back and forward, back and forward, back and forward. So at least we've got one on camera here while I look through the questions. Alright, so let's have a look through the other. Oh dear, there we go. Okay. Bear with me a moment. I've got a tiny bit to pan through these questions. So yeah, if I've missed a question as I go through these, I'm really sorry. I will jump on the comments and answer them after the live stream, but I've got some more here. See Leslie's tagged herself there. Yeah, so Leslie Barker Photography. Really good photos of the reds here. So Yvonne asks, where is the nearest red population to Mount Stewart? Well, the whole peninsula is a red squirrel stronghold, Yvonne, and so we'll bring it out a bit wider to Northern Ireland. So there's a couple of pockets of red squirrels in North Down, just north of us here. The Mournes is probably one of the bigger red squirrel populations in the area. So the Mournes right the way down to Newcastle and right the way up to Castle Ward. Then you've got the Glens of Antrim, so the very northeast Glens are another stronghold up there. And then you've got basically a couple of isolated populations still hanging on in the Foyle Valley up with the Northwest Red Squirrels group who cover that area. So I always get the two mixed up, Edgington or Ebrington. Anyway, from there, going through, I'm not sure, I think they're in Nesswoods as well. But anyway, yeah, Foyle Valley, Derry, Londonderry area. And then, of course, Fermanagh. Fermanagh is the big one, Fermanagh Lakelands, and then anywhere heading west, basically. West of the Shannon, from an island of Ireland perspective, is still really strong red squirrel strongholds, where the grey squirrel hasn't spread to yet. So lots around. Just from a wider UK perspective, Island of Anglesey in North Wales is a recovered red squirrel stronghold. There's a couple of pockets into Gwynedd and down into mid Wales, which sort of groups are working really hard on there to sort of hold the strongholds there. And you've got obviously a couple of bits in the North Lake district. Scotland, quite a lot of Scotland is still really good for red squirrels. Northumberland, very north sections there. Isle of Wight, interesting enough, going back down to the south coast. Where else? There's a small population in Formby, which is just next to Birkenhead, Liverpool, sort of north there. It's a little isolated peninsula. Just think we've got some of the reds there. Where have I missed? Brownsea Island, down on the south coast as well. Again, island population, isolated and easily controlled, so that no grey squirrels have reached there yet. So there's not much. So I guess from a numbers perspective, just to lead on to that, so there's maybe, there's figures get thrown around a little bit, maybe 100 to 150,000 red squirrels left within the UK and Ireland. Which makes it seem like a large number, but there are in excess of 3 million grey squirrels now. It's not great, to say the least. And the same thing has started to happen on Europe. So grey squirrels have started to establish themselves through southern Italy and are spreading north. And if they make it through the Alps, it's going to be sort of a real bad picture for ecology in general. So grey squirrels are certainly within Europe, they're in the top 10 species of union concern in terms of invasive species and the massive negative impact they have on woodland ecology. It's not just the direct impact they have on red squirrels, it's actually the impact they have across the board on all species and plant and woodland ecology. In North America, where they're native, not a problem, they have their place there. Out of there, absolute nightmare. It's exactly the same situation with the likes of Japanese knotweed, Himalayan balsam, Rhododendron ponticum, which are plants. It's. I'll get off my soapbox. Let's see. Chris and Brenda says, would you mind posting a link to the printed resources? Yep, I'll put it up as well, and John's actually just linked it as well. So you should find it in the links there, but I'll put it when we jump on as Mount Stewart later on, which sort of you see the Mount Stewart comments more. I'll get that link through. Let's see what else we got. Okay, Lily asks, how many reds are there in the UK as a whole? Oh, well, I've just answered that question. Okay, so yeah, so something around 100, 150,000. Sometimes you see the 200,000 mark. I mean, it's very hard to get a real population sense of these. I'm optimistic that certainly with the amount of work that is going on with red squirrel conservation groups and other ENGOs, and actually, to be fair, finally starting to see some real action from local authority as well in stepping up to control invasive species to improve native biodiversity. It's not everywhere, but some councils are doing really good now. I'd like to see a bit more from this area here, but I'm told there are some things in the pipework, but I'll believe it when I see it, and I'll give them kudos when we actually get some action there. So yeah, not great, Lily, but like I say, we're doing pretty well here in Northern Ireland, the island of Ireland as a whole. I think we've got a better chance here than anywhere within the sort of the UK and Ireland of being able to sort of potentially recover in the long run. But the game changer for this will be, just for everyone else's benefit, will probably be when the it's called the immunocontraceptive comes online as a method of grey control. So basically it's a way to effectively stop the grey squirrel from breeding, which means if they can't breed, their population will plummet, and then you can mop up with the usual traditional methods as a way to clear the areas and then allow for red squirrels to recover. But this is only going to happen if we also work on our bigger issue, which is the actual overall habitat fragmentation and loss in the long run. Yeah. So, okay, I am just trying to get the other questions here. Just lost my place, bear with me a minute. Okay. Jenny says, we spotted a red squirrel yesterday afternoon in the tree at the lake. Brilliant. Great for you to be able to see them. So there you go. Everybody who's been coming for years, there's another visitor that's seen them. So they're definitely out. And I'm actually here, here at the hide. There's actually 1, 2, 3. There's 4 here at the moment. Sort of all buzzing around all over the place. I'll just give it a zoom in there. There it is. Oh, there we go. There's going to be argy-bargy here. All right. I've got one down the ground. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit because I can see the questions a little easier then. Okay. So Chris and Brenda ask, what are the best trees and other plants to plant to encourage and support red squirrels? Right, that is a really good question. The first thing first is native. Now the native comes with a little bit of a caveat. Where you have red squirrel strongholds, native woodland's best, of course. Scots pines are obviously a really good favourite. It's one of the few sort of situations where we need to be realistic about what woodland exists, and there's a lot of technically non-native commercial forestry within Northern Ireland, so Sitka spruce, Douglas fir, and Norway spruce are viable trees. They're okay. Not in a monoculture is probably the main thing to say. If you're, say, wanting to establish a new bit of woodland, look for the good seed producing trees. So hazel, rowan, they'll use Scots pine, obviously one of the big main ones. Put a little bit of those firs and spruces in as well. And actually, I think I'm going to ask John here as well. There is a really good resource about looking at planting woodland for red squirrels on the NIEA portal, on the Northern Ireland Red Squirrel Forum portal. So he may beat me to it. He might put that link up there. It talks about obviously planting for red squirrels. If it's just red squirrels in the area, if there's a chance of greys in the area and you're not doing any control, you can plant to discourage greys. But it's only a short-lived thing. You know, you got to do the grey control if you want to keep reds in particular, and if you want a good quality woodland, you definitely need to control the grey squirrels out of an area. They just have such a detrimental impact on woodland in the long run. Stripping bark, really high density, and of course they remove a lot of the tree seeds that would be naturally regenerating your woodland for you. But I'll refer a bit more detail to the little link that will get put up unless John beats me to it. Okay. Laura says, sadly I have to go, but it's been brilliant live stream. Thank you very much. Oh, you're in. Oh yes, so you're in Central Lakes at RF Force. There we go. Yeah, so there's a few red squirrels there still. Heather asked, do they mate for life? Do you know what? I'm not actually that afraid on that. As far as I know, it's a bit of a competition. You'll see females kind of putting males through their paces. If you've ever seen sort of this sort of chasing, spiralling around and round trees behaviour, especially coming up in the next month or two, that's basically your mating and breeding behaviour. And the female will sort of get the male to chase them, to sort of look to see who's the fittest, pretty much. So as far as I know, you know, their partners will change as a result. But I actually haven't read much into that, whether they make. As far as I know, I don't think they do. But I'll look into that for you. Okay. Valerie says, brilliant. Can I ask how many babies one female would have per year? So this is another good question, just talking about breeding. They've all suddenly just disappeared. Red squirrel litters, they'll breed generally once a year. On a good year there'll be 2 breeding rounds. So right now, end of January into February is mating time. And then they'll have their first litters sort of coming out in the dray, you know, sometimes as early as late March into April, and then they'll be out, sort of you start seeing the kits out of the dray late May, early June sometimes, and then rinse and repeat. Now they'll have as many as sort of 6, possibly even 7 kits would be a big litter. Generally speaking, only 1 or 2 actually survive to leave the dray. So you're generally looking at maybe 3 or 4 kits per litter on average, but yeah, 1 or 2 actually making it into leaving the dray, and then that first year mortality rate is quite high, and that's one of the things we're focusing on here as part of the red squirrel conservation. Is we want to make sure that first year mortality rate drops. If they can make it through their first winter, which is why we do a certain amount of supplementary feeding, then they're far more likely to be set for the rest of their adult life. And of course, they'll also then breed the next year as well, so you're sort of getting a compounding effect of rebuilding that population. So they're born bald, blind, pretty much, you know, eyes all closed up, and they'll sit, you know, curled up within the dray. There was a fantastic video that was from a dray camera, I think it was in Germany actually, of the red squirrel female giving birth to them, and obviously just sort of a bit of time lapse showing them grow. Absolutely stunning. You almost feel for her, like she's all like this, like full, like heaving together, all in this tiny space. But it's comical and beautiful at the same time. And the kits, when they come out, you know, they're about half the size of, when they start coming out of the dray, they're half the size of the reds as it is. You know, reds are pretty small. You know, they only weigh about as much as a chocolate bar, about sort of 100, 150 grams, give or take, up to about 300 grams at the most. Where did she? I'm sure I saw the red there. She was just there somewhere a moment ago. Oh, there she is. If I'm just trying to think what to search for to find that. Probably just like red squirrel giving birth on YouTube should be able to find that really, really good video. I'm pretty sure it's from Germany. Worth watching. It's fascinating. Okay. Chris and Brenda says, Londonderry used to be a stronghold, but all changed very quickly. The pocket in Muff Glen, Eglinton, yeah, that's right. The same happened, ironically, just for this end of the Northern Ireland, Beaver Park and the Belfast area of Beaver Park, Minneburn and so on, that used to have red squirrels in the 90s. Then grey squirrels turned up and they're gone. So, you know, it's easy to forget actually how quickly grey squirrels and red squirrel decline has happened within the island of Ireland. So, excuse me for repeating myself. I know regular watchers will have heard me talk about this quite a lot, but we've got quite a lot of new viewers here. So, grey squirrels were first introduced into the island of Ireland in 1926, I think it was. I think it was 6 pairs or so into an estate in County Longford. And as far as we're aware, there have been no further introductions. So basically all of the grey squirrels that exist on the island of Ireland descend from these original pairs that were introduced, and they have spread fast and rapidly. So you know, we're talking not even 100 years yet here, and grey squirrels have taken over 50-60% of the island of Ireland already. And as like I say, we're seeing really promising signs that there's an element of grey squirrel population crash, which still not fully aware of what the mechanisms at work there are. Pine marten is sort of mooted to be one of the contributing factors. We've obviously got lots of groups like ourselves as the Archer Squirrel group, and North Down group, the Glens, the Northwest group, the Fermanagh, and so on. And they're all working really hard to one, hold the line in these red squirrel areas, but also expand by clearing grey squirrels from areas as well. So it happens so quickly. And just an example here, locally here on the Outer Peninsula, grey squirrels first turned up a little bit before 2010. And by the time I started here in 2015, there were about 10 or 12 red squirrels left here on the estate. Massive decline very quickly. They get outcompeted for food and resources, habitat and homes. And then there's the disease element that comes in with it, with the likes of squirrel pox. Very quick turn. So you're looking at partial, if not total, collapse of a red squirrel population within 5 to 10 years once grey squirrels arrive in an area. So that's why it's so important we maintain really good biodiversity, biosecurity when grey squirrels do arrive in an area. So they seem to be starting to calm down a little bit here. They've probably burnt themselves out running back and forward so much. Where's this one going to go? Just going to go and sit on this one maybe. There we go. Okay, Jennifer asks, has it been known for red and greys to breed together? Really good question. No, so they are completely different species. They do not like each other in the slightest, and no, they would be like biologically incompatible. So it's not like, say, if you have a donkey and a horse and you get an ass. They just don't breed together at all. Okay, Chris asks, have you got a pine marten population? Yeah, we talked about this earlier on. So yeah, we've got pine martens here on the peninsula. They're a low-level recovering population. So I know that we have one breeding pair, definitely on the estate here, with a few others sort of interloping back and forwards. The North Down population seem to be recovering really well as well, which is really good. Barbara says, Barbara Longstaff, red squirrels in North Yorkshire. Yes, of course, yes, there's a few pockets up there as well. There used to be right the way almost into Newcastle City, but I think that population has collapsed now, unfortunately. John's on the case with the links. Thank you so much, John. Connor says, so Connor's the chair of the North Down Red Squirrel and Pine Marten group here. He says, would you rather be attacked by one giant pine marten or 100 squirrels? One giant... I don't think... It's a tough question, isn't it? Because like at least you've got one. If it's one giant pine marten, you've got something to deal with. But they are vicious. You know, they've got incredibly powerful jaws and amazingly agile. You might think, oh, 100 squirrels, well, they're quite small. But you know, there's 100 of them. That is a tough question. I think I would go for pine marten because I know that either way I wouldn't win. At least pine marten, it'd be quick. There you go, how about that? Okay, Alan's just linking to the North Down Groups Facebook page. Yeah, if you're up in North Down, you know, certainly if you're local to the area, do get in touch with them, and they can carry out break control in your gardens as well. It's a really good way of being able to head them off at the pass in sort of private garden areas too. We do the same here with the Archer Red Squirrel group. Back gardens can be quite a significant sort of control route and area actually. So yeah, a real big thank you to all the landowners we work with here on the peninsula. We couldn't do what we do in terms of maintaining red squirrel strongholds without their permissions and cooperation and support. So really big thank you to them. Chris also asks, I have recently read that grey squirrels are protected under Wildlife Act and this is counterproductive for the control of grey, hindering the protection of reds. Right, so is that correct? So they're protected as a animal, you know, they're a sentient being in the sense that animal welfare laws apply. So, you know, you can't go around maiming, you know, actively stressing and what's the best way to describe it? You know, you can't be cruel to them. It's like, you know, that's basic animal welfare law. However, they're not protected in the sense that it's illegal or, you know, they have protections against their removal. Now, if anything, they actually have protections that require their removal. So it's illegal to move, release, allow to breed grey squirrels. They're a notifiable species in that sense. The only thing that's really missing from that is that if you have them present, that you must address their presence. Whereas if you compare that to, say, Japanese knotweed, for example, as a plant, if you have that on your property, you are legally obliged to make sure that that does not spread, and basically pretty much you need to treat it and remove it. So yeah, there's a little gap there, and I mean, if the legislation changed around that for the likes of not just grey squirrels but any invasive species that is, you know, causing net negative impact from an ecological and economic perspective, then yeah, I mean, that would also be a game changer. You know, to have the legal obligation to pull your finger out and address these issues, we wouldn't have the problems we have today. But it's only as good as the enforcement, of course. Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of a deep dark hole to sort of dip into. Yeah, I won't get too political for a homeschooling edition of the live stream anyway. Okay, let's pick up a few more questions. How long have we been going for? Oh, we've already been going for an hour here, so I'll pick up a few more questions here. Please put the red squirrel woodland planting link up. Yeah, we'll make sure that gets up there. Oh, John's put it in. Brilliant, thank you. So we covered some of this already. So Lily is asking, how do greys harm reds? So primarily it's indirect competition for resources, that's food and habitat. They do also, they can be quite aggressive actually, you know, they will be over dominant if they're moving in an area, so which again, that's basically competition for food and resources. But one of the big ones it's usually the nail in the coffin for red populations is that the grey squirrel is a harbour of the squirrel pox virus, which they have a certain immunity to. They've evolved with that virus. It came over with them from North America, and our native red squirrel population, the native red squirrel as a species, doesn't have any form of sort of resilience or resistance to the squirrel pox virus, and so they pretty much, it's like arguably like a 99%, 100% death rate, and it's like a 2-week slow, not particularly nice death as well. It's pretty horrific. It's all indirect, Lily. They don't actively attack and kill, if that makes sense. That's a bit of a myth. It's all competition resources: food, home, habitat, and all that sort of thing. That's how they harm. Okay. Nick Baker once said that the worst wildlife injury he ever had was being bitten by a squirrel trapped in a net as he rescued it. Not sure if it was right. Yeah, well, like all rodents, they have quite sharp, powerful jaws. They're not pointed teeth, but they're certainly very powerful. I mean, if they can break open, a nut, I struggle to crack a nut with my teeth, and if they can do it just that in a flash, then yeah, they're going to go through skin pretty easy. But it's like any wild animal, if they're stressed and they don't know that you're trying to release them. Bearing in mind that it is illegal to release grey squirrels, but if releasing a red, for example, you need to wear appropriate protection, keep your fingers well clear, definitely. Alright, that rain is really dripping down. Okay. I might have missed it. My screen's gone a bit funny, and I've got one thing pinned on my screen at the moment. So it's probably talking just to sort of round up. I get asked a lot, so why do we do that grey squirrel control? I mean, I've talked a lot about the reasons why already, and a lot of people ask how. I won't go into the main details, but the obvious control methods are air rifle dispatch. That is difficult to do in public areas, for example, for obvious reasons. So primarily what we do is we're using live cage traps. So this is one of the live cage traps. We modify all our traps to basically make sure that there's no additional stress and there's shelter for whatever's in it. It doesn't matter whether it's going to be dispatched or not. Animal welfare laws apply as they should, and we need to make sure that whatever animal is in there is safe from being stressed by perhaps, say, a badger or a fox starts finding the rabbit in the cage. Also from the elements, so we make sure that they've got a bit of weather protection while they're in there. We check our traps a minimum of twice a day. The legal compliant is actually once a day, but we make sure it's twice a day. In some cases that's 3 or 4 times a day, especially during breeding season for red squirrels. So we're trapping in red squirrel areas. Red squirrels will inevitably go into these. Now they get a free feed and then they get released, but it also gives us a chance to look at the population, look at their condition as well, which is really good. And obviously if it's a grey squirrel, it's then dispatched humanely. So humanely means it needs to be instantaneous. So generally speaking, that's a head trauma, so cranial dispatch. So it's basically a crush to the head, or one of the modified canyon traps, which will also do an instantaneous crush. So they're straight away. It works quite simple really. If I don't trap my finger in it, there we go. So the little door sits open, as you can see. Little trigger on it, and the little paddle at the back here sits up, and we'll put some food in this little box here. Squirrel goes in, treads on the paddle, and the door just closes. And then we obviously come by and check. If it's a red squirrel, it gets released. And if it's a grey squirrel, we dispatch it. And I often get asked as well, what do we do with the carcasses? When we're here within a red squirrel area, normally what I'd like to do is obviously leave them out for carrion. So for likes of buzzards and fox and things like that, so it goes back into the food chain and it's sort of proverbially not wasted. But because we have biosecurity issues here, so even the fleas that are on grey squirrels could potentially be a vector for transferring the squirrelpox virus if it was had it. So generally speaking, if we're trapping anything within a red squirrel area, it's incinerated or disposed of via usual waste methods. But if it's a grey squirrel only area, we try and leave them out for the likes of buzzards and things to pick them up. But interestingly enough, there's also quite a lot of restaurants and food sources, obviously they're all closed at the moment, that quite often request them for doing special sort of game dishes and things like that as well. I've also in the past had them off to scout groups, and they do their sort of catch for keeps and sort of various sort of dissection things, and sometimes obviously they're collected for scientific research as well, so if they're looking at diet studies and things like that. So first port of call is to try and make sure it sort of doesn't go to proverbial waste, and the next port of call is obviously making sure that it's obviously biosecurity sort of priority. So these reds they've been playing ball today, which is fantastic. They have been an absolute stars. Your questions today have been absolutely fantastic. So we're probably looking at just starting to wind up now. So if you've got any last questions, pop them in the comments. So obviously we're here at Mount Stewart, and we're still open for visitors by booking only under the current COVID restrictions, and obviously make sure you're staying local. As soon as we can, we're hoping that the Red Squirrel High can be open again. It'll probably be open under the same restrictions as we had to before, which is like sort of one bubble only per person. But you know, you can still see these guys out round the estate, and you know, I've said a few places through the live stream today that you can go out and see them as well. And yeah, you know, like I say, I hope you've enjoyed watching these guys. I mean, I'll stay on for a little bit. They've been gems today in the rain. It's brilliant. So Lily asks, what happens if a dog gets its nose in the trap? Well, the beauty with these traps is, and that's why we use only certain grades of traps, and we definitely don't use kill traps because they're indiscriminate. That's why we use live cage ones. The dog can't get in there to trigger it, basically. So it would have to be a really, really long-nosed dog to get its nose all the way down to the end to trigger it. But if for whatever reason it did have a trigger, it's only a small spring. It's not heavy. No, it's just enough to close the door. So a little pinch at the most, should we say? It's an important question, actually. You know, bycatch is always going to happen when you're doing any form of control of any particular species, be it invasive or pest or whatever it might be. And the most that you can do to minimise bycatch, you should always be doing that right the way through, and it's why we do not use kill traps at all anywhere here on the peninsula. They're indiscriminate, you can't guarantee what's going to go into it, so we only ever use live traps for that very reason. And you know, we amazingly, you wouldn't think it, but I've had a pheasant in one of these before, and they're quite difficult to get out. It's like pulling a barb out backwards. Jays will go in them sometimes, and even pine martins actually will fit into those as well, and they're quite awkward to get up. They can turn around. They're like a slinky. They can turn around in a really small space. So as long as you've got your gloves on, you release them, out they go. But generally speaking, we don't get a huge amount of bycatch, which is really good, and that's just generally in terms of like trap sighting and the type of baits that you're using as well can minimise bycatch. So yeah. Sarah's just joined us. Oh, good morning, Sarah. Just quickly pick up the last few bits of questions. John, you've been an absolute star. Thank you, John. He's linking to all of the Northern Ireland documents, and these are all the sort of resources and procedures and legislation that we follow, and we follow it to the T, or actually exceed its requirements, because well, it's good practice to do the best you possibly can, even if it is, you know, for a sake of dispatch. Okay, we got here last few bit of questions. Simon says, "Thank you for the great broadcast, fun for kids and adults alike." You're very welcome. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. I don't know where to focus the camera at the moment because there's five squirrels here now at the moment. So Alan says, we have a chap who feeds our dead grey squirrels to tame birds of prey and owls. Yes, that was one of the things I didn't mention actually, Alan. Yeah, falconers and ferreters, they quite often will take grey squirrel carcasses obviously for feeding their birds. That's brilliant. What a great snapshot that is with those those soggy little ear spikes. They look like they've been gelled into little horns. Brilliant. Alright. Becky says, have you caught any more pheasants? Yes, so I just said, thankfully only ever 2 pheasants in the 5 years have been here. Yeah, they are difficult to get out. But generally the aperture, the hole into the trap sort of calms that down a little bit. So yeah, thank you so much everybody. I think I'm going to have to call it out. I'm getting pretty cold now. So I really hope you've enjoyed today's live stream. I really have as well. It was great to have questions from the kids that are out there, so thank you so much for asking all your questions, kids. If you've got any others, do pop them in the comments even after this is finished. I'll get on and sort of type some out. Obviously, the next live stream is in a month's time. I haven't decided where or what yet, so always looking for inspiration from you guys about where I should go. Bearing in mind it's on Mount Stewart, and bearing in mind I'm sort of restricted by where the phone signal is on the estate. So I'm lucky here at the Hyde I get 1 bar of 4G, and as long as I don't move around too much, we're able to do these streams, which is really good. What else is there? Yes, so thank you for all our supporters who are donating towards our efforts here. Really appreciated. Do look up, if you're not in the Arts Peninsula area, or if you're up north, look up your local Red Squirrel groups here in Northern Ireland, or if you're on anywhere else, look up where they are and see if you can support them. We do all this voluntary, although my role as area ranger is a paid role. The Red Squirrel element is just a small part of that role, and we are supported by a huge element of volunteers that spend their time doing the trap check resources, the monitoring, the surveying and all the rest of it. And of course our supporters who are donating towards like the upkeep of food and kits and so on. And then of course our long-term efforts here at National Trust Mount Stewart, which is like getting the actual habitat in the right condition. Now that's the long game, and I've written my 30-year woodland management plan for the estate, and we've started work on obviously the first phases of that. So you're definitely going to hear a bit more about that over the coming weeks and months. And I'm really hoping that I know many of you have asked for a donations portal that you can target your donations to specifically this type of work. It's in the pipework. I know I keep saying that. Our website and stuff with the National Trust is very clunky, and I'm really sorry that it's not ready yet, but it will happen. But if you do want to get anything to us sooner, just get in touch with us. Private message, DM, or email us or phone the property, and there are ways. It's a bit of a roundabout way we can get it to work, but it's not a one-click one yet, I'm afraid. So thank you so much everybody, and I hope you have a good rest of your week and weekend, and yeah, get out and relax in your local area, get outside, take in the sights. I hope you enjoy the wildlife and environment around you, and you're all well. So we'll see you next time.